The story starts with a girl who introduces herself, saying her name is Jiao. She explains that she's a senior student, on the verge of graduation. She isn't much of a talker. In fact, she prefers the quiet company of books over the noise of people. Most of her days are spent not in the classroom, but in the library. There's a particular seat there that's very special to her, so special that it compels her to arrive early every single morning. She lives with 3 roommates. 2 of them are always wrapped up in their own busy worlds and barely talk to her, but the third, Feng, is her close friend. Feng happens to be an influencer with a massive social media following. Jiao, on the other hand, dreams of becoming a veterinary doctor. She loves animals deeply, though surgery terrifies her to the core. But still, she insists that no matter how clumsy her hands get during dissections, she wants to heal animals for a living. Then, with a shy little laugh, she admits she has a secret, a top secret. Back in her very first year of college, she developed a crush on a boy she saw rescuing a small bird and gently returning it to its nest. His name was Edward, a kind-hearted, strikingly handsome guy from the garden department. She never expected that one glance would leave such a deep impression. Yet, being painfully shy, she's never confessed her feelings. For 4 long years, she's kept them locked inside, pouring every thought into letters she never sends. 99 letters so far, each one like a private diary of unspoken love. Edward's department sits right across from the library, and that's the reason she guards that particular seat every morning. From there, she can catch a glimpse of him through the window. She's been doing this daily for 4 years, almost like it's part of her academic routine. Attendance in love, you could say. She smiles wistfully, saying she wishes that someday she'll gather enough courage to tell him how she feels. But deep down, she doubts that day will ever come. Even a brief sight of him from afar is enough to make her heart flutter. But then, one ordinary morning changed everything. As she was heading to class, she tripped unexpectedly, about to fall hard, but before she hit the ground, a hand caught her. She looked up in disbelief. It was Edward himself. Jiao froze. Her brain stopped functioning for a good 3 seconds. Then, to her utter confusion, Edward picked up her half-eaten apple, took a bite, and immediately apologized, laughing awkwardly. He asked if she was all right and offered to bring her a new apple. He told her that the tree they were standing under had been planted years ago by a teacher in memory of his lost love. Then, along with the apple, he handed her a small folded note. Jiao thanked him, clutching the apple like it was a sacred relic. Just as she was about to say something more, a teacher appeared around the corner and Edward, startled, dashed away faster than a guilty teenager caught with snacks in class. As she watched him disappear, Jiao thought about how she had spent 4 years dreaming of talking to him but never could. Yet somehow, thanks to this apple tree, it finally happened. She smiled to herself, wondering if this truly was a love tree. In her mind, the apple he gave her instantly became her most treasured love token. Later, she sat in the library, puzzled by the words written on the note. The language looked unfamiliar, so she went to the library's in-charge, Miss Gu, to ask for help. Miss Gu examined the note and said, "This is Taiwanese. It means thank you." Jiao's face lit up with joy. Then Miss Gu, lowering her voice a little, asked a favor. Could Jiao perhaps ask her Taiwanese friend to help confirm something for her? She explained that she had been sending letters for years to an address in Taiwan, but had never received a reply, and she just wanted to know whether the address was even valid. Jiao agreed immediately, partly out of kindness, but mostly because it meant she'd have an excuse to visit Edward's studio. She mustered all her courage and walked up to the building, only to freeze again at the entrance, her confidence evaporating at the door. Before she could retreat, Edward stepped out, instantly recognizing her. She blurted out that she needed his help with something. He smiled and said she could come inside. For the first time, she saw his workspace up close, the same place she'd been admiring from the library window all these years. She took in every detail and couldn't stop herself from saying how surreal it felt to finally be there. Then she explained Miss Gu's request that the librarian had been trying to reach someone in Taiwan for ages and hadn't received a response. She asked if Edward happened to have a friend there who could check the address in person. He nodded and agreed without hesitation. Jiao, nervous beyond belief, mumbled her thanks, and the moment she finished, she sprinted out of the studio as if chased by embarrassment itself. Edward couldn't help but laugh watching her flee. Back in her room, she grabbed her diary and began writing yet another letter to Edward, describing how nervous, excited, and clumsy she'd felt during their short conversation. She wrote that this was her 100th letter to him, another one she'd never actually sent, but would keep safely with the others. Just then, her roommate entered, looking dramatically miserable. She announced that she'd had yet another breakup, but at least, she said, her love life had some movement, unlike Jiao, who'd been writing to the same guy for 4 years without sending a single letter. Jiao rolled her eyes and said she preferred loving this way, quiet, safe, and paper-based. The next morning, however, Jiao woke to find the letter she'd written last night missing from her desk. Her roommate confessed cheerfully that she'd mailed it to Edward herself, saying, "You were never going to tell him anyway, so I helped." Jiao's world practically collapsed. She panicked, ran straight to Edward's office, and spotted the letter on his desk, thankfully still unopened. She tried to sneak in and retrieve it quietly, but of course, fate has a sense of humor. Edward walked in, right at that moment. He caught her red-handed and asked curiously why she wanted the letter back after sending it. What was in it that made her so nervous? Jiao, cornered and terrified, blurted out a lie. She said the letter wasn't meant for him. It was actually for his best friend, Chun, whom she liked. Edward looked surprised but smiled gently. "So you like Chun? All right then, I'll help you win his heart." Jiao stood frozen, realizing she had just made a small problem into a full-blown romantic catastrophe. Taking advantage of the moment, she snatched the letter from the table and ran out again, her heart pounding. Outside, she groaned in despair, wondering how on earth she would now face Edward or worse, his best friend Chun. From then on, every time Edward appeared with Chun, Jiao made a dramatic effort to vanish. Whether she was with her roommate, walking through the quad, or quietly studying, the second she saw the two of them approaching, she'd flee in the opposite direction, like a professional escape artist in emotional distress. That night, Jiao's friend Feng gathered everyone around, proudly introducing them to her brand new boyfriend. Jiao smiled warmly, teasing that although she herself wasn't very good at confessing her feelings, at least Feng was nothing like her. The girl had guts. She admired how Feng could see a guy she liked, say what was in her heart, and end up dating him. If confidence was a subject, Feng would have easily topped the class. Days went by peacefully, until one afternoon, Jiao was quietly working in the lab when Edward walked in with a friend. The moment she saw him, her hands froze mid-air. The tension between them could have powered a small electric grid. The two had plenty of unresolved misunderstandings, but apparently, Edward wasn't here for emotional chaos. He'd simply brought along a sick cat for help. Later that day, he casually suggested they should all go watch a movie that evening. In reality, his plan wasn't about the film at all. He was scheming to bring Jiao and Chun a little closer. Unfortunately, when evening arrived, Jiao didn't show up. Feng, being the ever-persistent matchmaker, nudged her to go anyway, saying that even if Edward misunderstood things, she should still go and spend time with him. Maybe then, he'd finally see her as more than the girl who keeps overanalyzing every social situation. Finally, Jiao gave in. She joined Edward and Chun at the theater. For the first few minutes, everything was fine until she noticed the man sitting in front of them. He was busy whispering sweet nothings to his girlfriend, who, to her horror, turned out to be Feng's new boyfriend. Jiao's jaw nearly dropped. Apparently, loyalty wasn't his strongest subject. Fuming, she left her seat and began following him. Her pursuit led her to a dimly lit bar, where she quickly found herself surrounded by a group of drunk men who had clearly mistaken politeness for interest. Just as things began to turn ugly, Edward appeared like an unexpected hero, pulling her out of the mess. But before he could say a word, she ran off again apparently. Justice for Feng's cheating boyfriend couldn't wait. In the restroom, she managed to secretly record a video of Feng's boyfriend with another girl. Unfortunately, they caught her in the act. A scuffle broke out, the kind of chaos you'd expect from an action drama. They lunged at Jiao, but Edward arrived just in time, grabbing his wrist mid-air and telling her to back off. Within seconds, it turned into a full-blown fight between Edward and Feng's boyfriend, while Jiao wrestled with the furious girlfriend. The scene was so dramatic, even the security guards joined the climax by storming in, forcing everyone to run for their lives. The trio, Jiao, Edward, and Chun, finally ended up hiding in Edward's office. Jiao carefully treated Edward's bruises, and when he gently returned the favor, applying medicine to her wound, the air between them grew tense. Both were acutely aware of how close they were. The next morning, Jiao sat worriedly, wondering how to send the video to Feng without making things weird. She feared it might seem like she had been snooping. Edward shrugged and said he'd send it himself after all. He was just a stranger to Feng, and with that, he did. Later, Edward and Jiao visited Miss Gu, who had asked them to find an address. Edward explained that the man she used to send letters to no longer lived there, he had moved away. Miss Gu sighed deeply and began telling her story. Back in college, there had been a boy she had secretly loved, and he had loved her too, but neither ever confessed. Years later, she unexpectedly received letters from him, expressing how much he had liked her and even dedicating an old Taiwanese love song to her. But because the letters were written in Taiwanese, it took her a long time to understand them. And when she finally sent her reply, she never heard back. Now that she knew he had moved away, she regretted not confessing her feelings when she had the chance. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered that she should have spoken up in college instead of hiding her heart behind silence. Hearing her, both Edward and Jiao were deeply moved. As Jiao walked home, her mind kept circling around Miss Gu's words, the fear that one day she too might live with such regret. That thought alone made her decide that she must gather courage and confess her feelings to Edward soon. But first, there was one last thing to do. Since Miss Gu mentioned that her lover had once dedicated a Taiwanese song whose CD she could never find, Jiao and Edward decided to help her. After searching tirelessly, they finally found the CD. When Miss Gu heard the song, tears welled up again. Each lyric felt like a gentle whisper from the past. She thanked them from the bottom of her heart, and the two left with smiles, happy to have given her a piece of her youth back. Soon after, Edward arranged a private date between Chun and Jiao. Chun looked serious. He admitted that he didn't actually like her. He liked her friend Feng. Jiao laughed in relief, replying that she too liked someone else. And just like that, the misunderstanding between them finally dissolved. As time passed, Jiao and Edward began chatting more often, spending nearly every spare moment together. With their final exams approaching, both of them were working hard, though their long study sessions were frequently interrupted by playful bickering about who deserved better grades. Jiao still struggled with surgical practice, so Edward often came by to encourage her, partly because he cared, and partly because her stressed-out face looked unintentionally hilarious. Thanks to his support, she finally managed to complete her surgery successfully and passed her exams. Edward too finished his project beautifully, earning his own passing marks. To celebrate, their group decided to go out together. Feng took Jiao aside and reminded her that this was the day she had to confess her feelings no matter what, insisting she shouldn't back down this time. Jiao nervously agreed. Everyone gathered, dressed for the outing, and when Jiao appeared before Edward in a completely different look, he froze in place. She looked stunning, the kind of beautiful that made time stand still. Edward found himself unable to look away, as though every blink would be a crime against art. Soon, the group reached the amusement park, where laughter, games, and silly dares filled the air. Jiao's friends tried to spook both of them deliberately, just so they'd end up closer. Later, Jiao and Edward found themselves in a tiny car ride, and she finally gathered the courage to speak her heart. But just as she began, another car rammed into theirs. Edward's head spun violently. For a moment, it looked as if something serious had happened. He steadied himself, then urged Jiao to leave the ride area with him. On their way home, Feng teased them both, saying the taxi was already full and they'd have to go together. Edward agreed, but instead of taking her straight home, he brought her to his secret place, a quiet, beautiful spot that immediately captivated Jiao. They talked endlessly about everything: life, college, memories. Then, with trembling hands, Jiao pulled out her letters and began reading them aloud. She confessed that she had liked him from the very first day she saw him helping those birds during the trip. She admitted she was so taken by him that she started following him like a harmless little thief. She was the one who secretly took that picture of him outside the office. She even used to sneak into his class just to catch a glimpse of him, though he never once noticed her there. Every day she'd wait, hoping to see him, pretending to pass by casually as if it were coincidence. Those moments, brief as they were, became the highlight of her day. She recalled how they finally met when he saved her from falling and even ate her apple that day, something she still found strangely romantic. From there, their friendship grew like a dream she never wanted to wake from. Even now, as she spoke, it all still felt like a fantasy. She told him that she had liked him deeply for 4 whole years, not just as a friend, but as someone who had become her entire world. Her every day began and ended with thoughts of him. He had been her source of courage, especially during the surgery, and it was because of him that she succeeded. She thanked him sincerely for making her college life so special, saying that without him, her memories would have been empty. Then, just as she was about to say the 3 words she'd been holding back for years, Edward stopped her midway. He asked calmly why she was being so serious, reminding her that they were just friends. Jiao froze, unable to believe what she had heard. Edward continued, explaining that he helped everyone and treated all kindly, and that she shouldn't misunderstand his actions. He then asked her to stay quiet, saying it was already late and they should head home. As if that weren't painful enough, he casually mentioned that he was moving to Taiwan after graduation and that they might never meet again. Jiao's heart shattered completely. It became clear that Edward had never liked her, not even a little. Days went by, and Jiao stopped meeting him altogether. She became silent again, avoiding people, avoiding laughter, almost like a shadow of her old self. What hurt her most wasn't just rejection, it was that he hadn't even let her finish saying the words she'd been dying to express. Her world felt empty. She spent most of her time alone, disconnected from everything. Then came the pre-graduation party. Edward was there too, yet neither of them spoke or even exchanged glances. Graduation day followed. Everyone was celebrating with wide smiles, except Jiao, who looked detached and hollow. As she prepared to leave, she noticed Edward's project displayed in the hall. It had won first place. But what stunned her most was that the photo he'd used wasn't his solo shot. It was the one of him and Jiao together. She stood frozen, wondering if she had perhaps meant something to him after all. If she did, why had he hidden it? Determined to find answers, she rushed to the boys' dorm, only to learn from Chun that Edward had already left for the airport. Without hesitation, Jiao ran all the way to the airport, calling out his name as loudly as she could. Edward turned, shocked to see her. Jiao caught her breath and shouted that she loved him, that she had loved him madly for 4 long years, but she didn't want anything in return. She only wanted him to be happy, to live joyfully with whoever he loved next. She ended with a soft smile, saying that if she hadn't confessed today, she too would have lived a life full of regret, just like Miss Gu. Edward just looked at Jiao and smiled, not saying a single word in reply. That smile was enough. It wasn't rejection this time, it was quiet pride, because Edward was happy that Jiao had finally become brave enough to say what was once buried inside her heart. Then the story jumped ahead by a full year. Jiao was now meeting her old roommates again, and we learned that Feng and Chun had actually become a couple. The rest of their friends too were doing well in their lives, each chasing their dreams. Jiao herself had become successful, mature, and confident, far from the shy, nervous girl she once was. One night, while returning home after work, she mentioned that Miss Gu had passed away, a fact that saddened her deeply. As she walked through the quiet streets, a sudden thought struck her. She wanted to visit Edward's secret place once again. When she reached there, the place wasn't as beautiful as it used to be. The flowers had wilted, the paint had faded, and the air felt still. Yet, there was something sacred about it, as if memories still lived there. Then something caught her eye, a small letter resting inside the old mailbox. She pulled it out, and to her shock, it was addressed to her, written by Edward himself. Her hands trembled as she opened it and began reading. Inside, Edward had poured his heart out, confessing everything he had never said aloud. He wrote that when he visited Miss Gu's lover's house in Taiwan, the man she once loved, he found out that the man had already passed away years ago. Among his belongings were stacks of letters he had written to Miss Gu but never sent. Edward delivered all those letters to Miss Gu, who broke down upon receiving them. He comforted her, telling her that perhaps her lover's soul could finally rest peacefully now that his words had reached her. Together, they folded those letters into small boats and set them afloat in the river. After that, Edward couldn't stop hearing Jiao's voice echoing in his mind, the moment she had said, "I love you." It haunted him gently, like a melody that refused to fade. Then came his biggest confession. He revealed that the day Jiao had first seen him, he too had noticed her for the first time. Her bright face had stood out in the crowd, especially those worried eyes that looked ready to catch him if he ever fell. From that moment, he liked her too. He admitted that he used to visit her class just to see her, not realizing that she was doing the same, sneaking into his class at the same time. It was a comedy of fate. They were practically playing hide and seek without realizing it. Edward said he always noticed her little tricks, her curious glances, her attempts to hide, and each time his heart felt lighter. But he never gathered the courage to approach her, until that one day when fate finally pushed them together, literally, as he caught her before she fell. He confessed that he had planned that encounter. He had walked over to her on purpose because he wanted to talk to her. He even gave her a note written in Taiwanese, hoping she'd return to him again and again to ask for the meaning. He didn't expect her to figure it out on the same day. Smartness really does ruin good excuses sometimes. As time went on, he wrote, their bond grew stronger, and for a while, he felt truly happy, like he'd finally found someone he could spend forever with. But then, life decided to be cruel. Just 1 month before graduation, Edward discovered he had a brain tumor. The doctors told him he didn't have much time left. His world collapsed in that instant. Everything he had dreamed of came crashing down. He cried endlessly, drowned his nights in alcohol, and felt completely lost. But every time he saw Jiao, something inside him lit up again. She gave him the will to live, the strength to smile. He decided that instead of spending his last days in a hospital bed, he wanted to spend them with her, in laughter, in peace, and in the illusion of an ordinary life. However, when he realized that she loved him just as deeply, his heart broke all over again, because he knew that once he was gone, it would destroy her. So that day, when she tried to confess her love, he stopped her midway, not because he didn't feel the same, but because he didn't want her to suffer after he was gone. He ended the letter saying, by the time you read this, I might no longer be in this world, but thank you for making my final days beautiful, for filling my life with warmth and love I never thought I'd have. Zhao's eyes brimmed with tears as she finished reading. The weight of his absence crashed upon her, the truth that Edward was gone forever. Her gaze wandered around the place until it landed on a painting resting against the wall. When she looked closely, she froze. It was her own portrait. That meant every time she had secretly looked at him through the library window, Edward had been watching her too, observing her carefully enough to paint her face from memory. Just then, a familiar voice called her name. She turned around and saw him, Edward's spirit, glowing softly, smiling warmly at her. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Jiao smiled through her tears. Both of them had finally confessed their feelings, freeing themselves from regret, unlike Miss Gu and her lover, who kept their emotions buried forever. And with that tender, heart-touching moment, the story came to an end.